The largest section of the Third Estate in France during the late 18th century consisted of peasants, who made up nearly 80% of the total population. This vast majority lived in conditions that were often harsh and uncertain. While the feudal system in France had weakened compared to earlier centuries, and most peasants were legally free, unlike the serfs still bound to the land in parts of Eastern Europe at the time. Their freedom was often more theoretical than practical. A small proportion of peasants were fortunate enough to own their own plots of land, which offered them a degree of independence and security. However, for the overwhelming majority, life was far more difficult. Many peasants were landless or owned holdings so small that they could barely sustain themselves. Their meager resources meant that subsistence farming was the norm, leaving little room for surplus or savings in times of bad harvests. Tenant farmers and sharecroppers were often in the most precarious position. After paying rents to landlords, usually in both cash and a share of the crops, they were left with only a fraction of their produce, often 1/3 or even 1/4 of what they had grown. This minimal share had to feed their families, cover other expenses, and sometimes pay additional taxes. Those who worked for daily wages on the land were even worse off, earning barely enough to survive from day to day. Adding to their burdens were the numerous feudal dues and obligations that still lingered. Peasants were often required to work on the lord's land without pay, the corvée, pay tithes to the church, and contribute taxes to the crown. Combined with poor harvests, fluctuating grain prices, and the ever-present threat of famine, these factors created a life of constant struggle and insecurity for the peasant class. Thus, while the Third Estate encompassed a wide range of social and economic groups, from wealthy merchants to skilled artisans, it was the peasants, living in poverty and bearing the heaviest share of taxes and labor, who formed the backbone of French society, yet enjoyed the fewest rights and benefits. Their plight was one of the driving forces behind the discontent that eventually fueled the French Revolution.